How could I have been so damn blind? I should have seen it coming, but no, I was too busy believing the lies. My name is Hannah, and I'm 35 years old. I thought I had everything figured out, a family, a stable life. Little did I know one phone call would unravel it all, and what came after would change everything I thought I knew about love, betrayal, and survival. Greg had never been what you'd call stable. He jumped from job to job, always full of big ideas, but never quite sticking with anything long enough to see it through. I did my best to support him, but it was exhausting. I worked full-time as a project manager, pulling in the steady paycheck while Greg would at best be in between jobs. Still, I stayed hopeful. For every disappointing moment, there were a handful of good ones that kept me holding on. Ryan, our son, was the bright spot in everything. From a young age, he amazed us both with his intelligence. By the time he was 5, he could read books meant for older kids, and always asked the kind of questions that made me pause and think. It was easy to get caught up in his world of endless curiosity, and honestly it gave me the strength to face the hardships at home. Greg and I used to talk about our dreams of traveling, of adventures we'd have as a family. We spoke about getting a camper van, one that would allow us to drive across the country, exploring places we'd never seen. For months, the idea seemed to breathe life back into our relationship. Maybe this was the sign we needed, the start of something new and exciting. But like most things in our marriage, it wasn't as simple as it seemed. The plan was for Greg and me to buy the van, but because of his poor financial history, the loan fell on my shoulders. It should have been a red flag, but I was too caught up in the idea of creating memories. I agreed, convincing myself that Greg was finally getting his act together. He'd been steady for the last 3 years. Maybe he was changing. When the camper van was finally delivered, I was filled with excitement. I had visions of our family embarking on road trips, Ryan's face lighting up with joy as we explored new places. But as I walked into the house that morning, an email popped up on my phone, one that would change everything. It was from Greg. I felt a tightness in my chest as I opened it, not knowing what to expect. The message was short, the words searing through me like a lightning bolt. I've fallen in love with someone else and decided to start a new life. My mind froze. What was he talking about? This wasn't happening. It couldn't be. I quickly dialed his number, my hand shaking. Greg, what do you mean by this? My voice trembled, and I instantly hated myself for sounding so weak. But it was too late. His response came, cold and final. I've found someone else. I'm leaving. The camper van's in your name, so you'll handle the loan payments. I'll file for divorce. The words echoed in my mind as I struggled to process them. Divorce? Now? Just like that? After all we'd been through, after everything we'd worked for, it ended with him choosing another woman. Before I could even respond, the call ended. My heart pounded in my chest as I stared at the phone. My thoughts raced. How could he just leave? How could he do this to me, to us? I wanted to scream, to demand an explanation, but I couldn't. My body felt numb, as if my very soul had been ripped from me. In the midst of the shock, my mind suddenly shifted to Ryan. How am I supposed to tell him this? My 10-year-old son, who had been so excited about the camper van, about the trips we would take. He was already so mature for his age, but how could I explain that his father was gone? That everything was falling apart? The weight of it all felt like it was crushing me. I sat there in silence, staring at the phone, feeling the emptiness growing within me. How could this happen? How could Greg do this to us? The confusion and pain of that moment were overwhelming, but beneath it all, a rising sense of panic began to creep in. What do I do now? I felt like I was losing control of everything. My life, my family, my future. I quickly checked my email again, hoping that maybe there was some kind of mistake, some kind of explanation, but no, it was real. I called Greg again. His phone went straight to voicemail. Why won't he answer? My mind was racing. I didn't know what to do, but I knew I had to figure it out. What will I tell Ryan? How will I explain that his dad? Before I could finish the thought, the doorbell rang, and I quickly wiped the tears from my eyes. It was Ryan. His face, usually so full of energy and curiosity, was now clouded with concern. "Mom, are you okay?" he asked, his voice quiet, yet sharp with worry. I tried to smile, but it felt like my whole world was crumbling around me. "I'm just tired, sweetie," I lied. my voice shaking. Ryan wasn't fooled. He could always tell when something was wrong. He walked over and hugged me tightly, pressing his little body against mine. I felt his warmth, and for a moment I just let myself hold him. If there was anything I knew for sure, it was that I had to protect him, no matter what. How could I ever explain this to him? I could still hear Greg's words ringing in my ears, sharp and final. I've fallen in love with someone else and decided to start a new life. How could he say that so easily? I had always known our marriage had its flaws, but this was a betrayal I couldn't have anticipated. As I sat there, staring at the phone, I felt the heavy weight of the situation sinking in. My chest tightened and my breath came in shallow gasps. How could he do this to me? I had always tried to support him, tried to make our family work, despite the ups and downs. But this was different. He had taken everything from me in a single breath, and I was left standing in the ruins of our life. I looked down at my hands, trembling uncontrollably. What am I supposed to do now? The questions kept spinning in my mind, each one more paralyzing than the last. How could I fix this? What would happen to Ryan, to the future we had built? I didn't even know where Greg was. He had just vanished, leaving behind nothing but his words and the weight of a loan that now lay heavily on my shoulders. I couldn't even get in touch with him. Every attempt to call him, to reach out, ended in nothing but silence. It was then that I realized the full extent of his betrayal. He wasn't just leaving me emotionally, he had taken everything we had built together, even the camper van, something we had both agreed upon as a symbol of our shared dreams. How could he do this to us? My thoughts were interrupted by Ryan's soft voice calling from the hallway. "Mom, are you okay? You look sad." I wiped my tears quickly, trying to pull myself together. "I'm fine, sweetheart, just a little tired, that's all." Ryan walked into the room, his small frame carrying a wisdom far beyond his years. He didn't buy my lie. He never did. "You don't look fine, Mom. You look like you've been crying. Is it about Dad?" The question hung in the air between us, and for a moment, I didn't know how to respond. I could feel the lump in my throat, and no matter how hard I tried to fight it, I couldn't hold back the tears. Ryan, usually so calm, looked at me with concern. "Mom, what happened? Did you and Dad fight again?" I couldn't lie to him anymore. Not now. Not when he was looking at me with those big searching eyes. "Ryan," I began, my voice shaky. "Dad, he's gone. He's with someone else now. He's leaving us." Ryan blinked, as if processing the words I had just said. For a moment there was nothing but silence. Then without warning he spoke again, his voice much softer than usual. "I knew something was wrong, Mom. I've seen how Dad's been acting. But I thought maybe it would be okay. I didn't think he would just leave." I felt a wave of guilt wash over me. I had tried so hard to protect Ryan from the truth, to shield him from the pain I was feeling, but now it seemed as if he had already known more than I gave him credit for. How could I have missed the signs? "I'm sorry, Ryan," I whispered, feeling the weight of the moment press down on me. "I never wanted you to know any of this, but now you do, and I need you to know that I'm going to make sure we're okay. I won't let this break us." Ryan, wise beyond his years, hugged me tightly. I could feel his little body trembling against mine, and it broke my heart. "I know, Mom. We'll be okay," he said, his words a strange comfort amidst the chaos. But even as he said this, I couldn't shake the feeling that our world had shattered. There was a part of me that still hoped Greg would come back, that maybe this was just a phase, but deep down, I knew it wasn't. He was gone, and I was left to pick up the pieces. The next few days were a blur of confusion and fear. I tried to stay strong for Ryan, but every time I looked at the camper van in the driveway, I felt a pit in my stomach. It wasn't just the vehicle itself, it was everything it represented. Our dreams, our plans for the future, the hope that maybe things could change. Then came the letter, a demand for payment on the loan. My heart sank as I opened it, the reality of the situation hitting me all over again. How am I supposed to handle this on my own? I tried to focus, to think clearly, but all I could feel was panic rising within me. I had no idea where to start, no idea how to get Greg to answer his phone or come back to face his responsibilities. The weight of the debt pressed down on me, and the uncertainty of it all made it hard to breathe. How could he do this? My mind raced with one overwhelming question. What do I do now? I had to face the truth. Greg wasn't coming back, and I was left to figure out how to move forward, alone with Ryan and a mountain of debt. Days passed, in a haze of overwhelming emotions and restless thoughts. I couldn't focus on anything, couldn't shake the sense of dread that seemed to have rooted itself deep within me. I would go through the motions of everyday life, work, meals, taking care of Ryan, but my mind was never truly in the moment. It was always replaying that one phone call, the coldness of Greg's voice echoing in my mind. Each time I passed the camper van parked in the driveway, I felt my stomach twist. The dreams we had of family trips, of driving across the country and seeing new places together had crumbled. It felt like a cruel joke. It was as if Greg had taken everything, our future, our happiness, our plans, and walked away without a second glance. I had tried reaching out to him again, multiple times, emails, phone calls, even messages through social media. Each time, nothing. It was as if he had vanished off the face of the earth. And the silence, it was suffocating. The man I had spent the last decade with, who I had shared my life, my hopes, my heart with, had disappeared without a trace. One evening, as I sat in front of the kitchen table staring blankly at the pile of bills that had started to accumulate, Ryan came into the room. He had always been perceptive, a little too much for his own good. "Mom, are you okay?" he asked softly, his voice carrying the same concern it had when he first noticed I wasn't eating much. I forced a smile, but it felt fragile, almost like a mask that could break at any moment. "I'm fine, sweetheart. Just a little tired, work and everything." Ryan wasn't fooled. He looked at me with that look, the one that told me he knew something was wrong but didn't quite understand what. "Mom," he said, hesitating for a moment, "I've been thinking, maybe we should try and get the camper van back. It's in your name, right? It's yours." I blinked, caught off guard by his suggestion. Get the camper van back? Of course I had thought about it, but how could I possibly go after something Greg had taken? He was gone, and the idea of chasing after him seemed impossible. But Ryan, despite being only 10, had always been sharper than most adults I knew. He looked at me with those serious eyes of his, as if he had already figured out something I hadn't. "We could try, Mom. If it's really in your name, then it's ours. You shouldn't have to let him take it from." I stared at him, amazed at how clear-headed he was, how resilient he seemed despite everything that was happening around him. It was as if he had become the one who was trying to keep things together, while I was the one unraveling. "Ryan," I began, my voice cracking slightly, "I don't know how to even begin doing that. I don't even know where Greg is. How can we get it back when he's disappeared? And how can I ask for something that he clearly doesn't want to give?" But Ryan didn't back down. "Maybe we don't have to ask him," he said matter-of-factly. "Maybe we can find a way to track him down and get it ourselves." I looked at him in stunned silence, my mind racing. Track him down? Could we really do that? How would we even begin? But Ryan wasn't finished. "I've been thinking about something," he said, eyes bright with determination. "Remember when we went hiking and I got lost? You gave me that phone with the GPS tracker on it so you could always know where I was. Well, maybe we could use that to find Dad. If he has the phone with the app, we can track where he's going." I blinked, processing his words. That's actually a brilliant idea. The phone. The one we'd gotten him after that hiking trip when I was worried about him getting lost. I hadn't thought about it in ages, but Ryan had a point. The phone had a GPS tracker, and it was linked to both Greg and me. It was a long shot, but maybe it was the only shot we had. "Ryan," I said, my voice trembling with a mix of shock and admiration. "That's an incredible idea. I don't know how you thought of that, but it's worth a try." Ryan smiled, a grin that was equal parts pride and excitement. "I knew it would work. We can find him, Mom, and then we can get the camper van back. We don't have to let him just take everything from us." I felt a lump form in my throat. For the first time in days, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe this wasn't over. Maybe we could fix this. Maybe, just maybe, we could get our lives back. "Okay," I whispered, determination rising within me. "We'll do it. We'll track him down." As Ryan and I started to plan our next steps, I felt a surge of strength I hadn't felt in days. I wasn't alone in this. We were going to fight for what was ours, for Ryan's future, for the life we deserved. And no matter what it took, I wasn't going to let Greg steal that from us. The days that followed were a blur of activity, my mind consumed with one singular thought. How can I find Greg? I couldn't believe I was at this point in my life, chasing after the man who had promised to be my partner, who had sworn to stand by me through thick and thin. Instead, I was left scrambling to track him down, to recover the only tangible thing left of our once shared life, the camper van. But as the hours passed, it wasn't just the camper van that seemed to slip further away. It was the very sense of who I was. Was I still the person I had been before all of this? The hard-working mother who had done everything to protect her family? Now I was suddenly someone I didn't even recognize, desperately chasing after something that felt increasingly out of reach. The house, once filled with laughter and dreams, now felt empty and cold. It was as if the walls themselves were closing in on me, each minute that passed a reminder of the life I thought I had, but no longer did. Ryan's plan, however, began to take shape. The GPS tracker on the phone was our only lead. As soon as I gave Ryan the green light, he sprang into action. I had to admit, his focus and determination were something to behold. Despite everything, he was the one who seemed to be holding it all together. It was as though the roles had reversed, and he was the parent now, while I was the one trying to keep it together. "Mom, I've found it," Ryan said one afternoon, his voice trembling with a mix of excitement and nervous energy. I had been sitting at the kitchen table going through papers and trying to clear my mind. The sense of helplessness had begun to wear me down and I could feel the anxiety rising again. But when Ryan spoke, it was as if the air shifted. "What? You found him?" I asked, my heart racing. Ryan's eyes met mine, bright with hope. "I think so. I can see where his phone is. It's moving like he's driving." The relief that washed over me was overwhelming. I stood up so fast, the chair scraping loudly across the floor. "This is it. This is our chance." "Where is he?" I asked, rushing over to Ryan's side. I peered at the screen of his phone, my breath catching in my throat. A dot on the map blinked steadily, marking his location. It's close," Ryan said, pointing to the screen. "Just outside the city. I think he's on his way somewhere. He's been moving around for the past few days." I nodded, the gears of my mind turning furiously. We can do this. We can get the camper van back. But even as I thought it, a new wave of fear crept in. What if we confront him and he refuses to give it back? What if he tries to avoid us again? But Ryan didn't seem fazed. "Don't worry, Mom. We can do this. We've got the phone. We know where he is." His confidence was infectious, and for the first time in days, I allowed myself to believe that maybe, just maybe, we could turn this situation around. We quickly made a plan. Ryan and I would go after Greg together. I wasn't sure what we would do once we found him. What if he refuses? What if he tries to make it harder for us? But I knew we couldn't let him get away with this. He had already stolen so much from us, and I was done letting him take more. As we headed toward the area where Greg's phone had been tracked, I couldn't help but think about the strange twist of fate that had brought us here. Just a few weeks ago, I never would have imagined we'd be in this situation. How did everything fall apart so quickly? But there was no time to dwell on that now. We were getting closer. My heart pounded in my chest as we turned down streets I didn't recognize, my mind racing with questions. What would I say to him? Would he listen to me? Ryan remained calm beside me, his focus unwavering. He was looking at the phone again, confirming that we were getting closer to Greg's location. "Mom, we're almost there," he said, "just a little further." I glanced at Ryan, his face set in determination, and for the first time, I felt a spark of hope. We can do this. We can get through this together. As we approached the area where Greg's phone was last pinged, my anxiety reached a peak. The location was a small park near the outskirts of the city. I knew it wasn't far from where Greg had lived with us, but there was something unnerving about it, something that made my skin crawl. What if he's with her? The thought made my stomach churn, but I quickly pushed it aside. There was no time for distractions. We had a mission. We parked a little further down the road and walked the rest of the way following the GPS signal closely. The park was quiet, save for the rustling of leaves and the occasional sound of birds. As we walked, I could feel my heart hammering in my chest. What if he's not here? What if this whole thing is a wild goose chase? But Ryan was sure and I couldn't back down now. We reached the park's entrance, and Ryan stopped in his tracks. "Mom," he whispered, looking ahead. There, near a secluded corner of the park, was Greg's car. It was unmistakable, the camper van. He had it parked in a secluded area, just as if he had been hiding it away, thinking no one would find him. I froze for a moment, the realization hitting me all at once. We found him, we found the camper van, but now, the real challenge was about to begin. As I stood there, my breath caught in my throat. It felt as if time had stopped. The camper van loomed before me, a stark reminder of everything Greg had taken from us. It was parked in a quiet, almost hidden corner of the park, as though he had been trying to keep it out of sight. My heart pounded in my chest as the gravity of the situation sank in. This was it. We were about to confront Greg, the man who had torn our family apart, who had left without a word, taking our dreams, and leaving me with nothing but debts and broken promises. Ryan stood beside me, his hand gently holding mine. I could feel the calm determination in his small grip, and for the first time in days, I felt a sense of clarity. "I'm not alone. We're in this together. What do we do now, Mom?" Ryan's voice was steady despite the intensity of the moment. "Should we go up to him?" I took a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves. Every inch of my body screamed at me to turn away, to walk back, and pretend this wasn't happening. But I knew I couldn't do that. Not anymore. Greg had taken so much from us already. It was time to take a stand. "Yes," I said firmly, my voice more confident than I felt. "We need to confront him. He can't keep running away from his responsibilities." Ryan nodded, his eyes never leaving the camper van. I could see the wheels turning in his head. He's so much more composed than I am, I thought, amazed at his maturity. He was right. This was our only chance to get what we needed to move forward, to rebuild our lives. We walked slowly toward the camper van, every step heavy with the weight of what was about to happen. I could see Greg's car parked nearby, but there was no sign of him. The air around us felt thick with tension, the kind of silence that screams just before a storm. And then, out of nowhere, I heard the unmistakable sound of footsteps approaching from behind the camper van. I froze, and I could feel Ryan's body stiffen beside me. A moment later, Greg appeared around the corner, his eyes widening when he saw us standing there. "Hannah? Ryan?" Greg's voice was hesitant, almost surprised, like he hadn't expected us to find him. But there was a coldness in his tone, a lack of emotion that cut through me like a blade. His eyes quickly flicked to the camper van, and I could see a flash of discomfort cross his face. "Greg," I said, my voice trembling but resolute. "We need to talk. You've taken enough from us. The camper van, it's in my name, it's ours, and I'm here to take it back." Greg stepped back slightly, as if he had been expecting something, but perhaps not quite this. "Hannah, I don't know what you're talking about. I just borrowed the van. I was going to return it." "Borrowed it?" I repeated, incredulous. "You're lying. You knew it was in my name. You knew I was the one responsible for paying the loan. You didn't just borrow it, Greg, you took it. You took everything." Ryan's small voice suddenly cut through the tension. "Dad, why did you leave us? Why did you go with her? Why didn't you care about us?" I felt my heart twist at Ryan's words, the vulnerability in his question. He was only 10, and yet here he was, facing his father with the maturity I had never expected. Greg didn't answer right away. He just looked at Ryan, and for a moment I saw something flicker in his eyes. Guilt, maybe? Or was it just avoidance? It didn't matter. I wasn't happy, okay?" Greg finally muttered, running a hand through his hair in frustration. "I didn't want to hurt anyone. I thought it was just a phase. I thought I could make things work. But then I met someone else, and everything just changed." Ryan didn't flinch at his words. Instead, he stepped forward, standing taller than I expected for someone his age. "That's not an excuse, Dad. You're not being honest. You don't get to just leave us because you're unhappy. You have to face up to what you've done." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Ryan, my little boy, was standing up to Greg, the very man who had betrayed us, who had shattered our world, and here was Ryan showing him what real strength looked like. I couldn't have been prouder of him, but as much as I wanted to protect him from this, I knew he needed to hear the truth. We both did. Greg shifted uncomfortably, his gaze darting between Ryan and me. He clearly didn't know how to respond. I'm sorry, okay? I never meant for any of this to happen, but the van, it's mine now. I thought you'd just let it go." "Let it go?" I felt the anger rise in me, but I kept it in check, focusing on the one thing that mattered. "You don't get to just take what doesn't belong to you and leave us with the consequences. The camper van is in my name. You took it without asking, and now you're going to return it. All of it. The van, the money you took from our savings, and everything else you owe us." At that, Greg's expression faltered. "I can't just... It's not that simple." I took a step closer, my voice unwavering. "It is that simple, Greg. You've taken enough. You've already hurt Ryan and me. Now it's time to face up to what you've done." There was a long, heavy pause as Greg stood there, looking at me with a mixture of frustration and guilt. Finally he sighed, his shoulders slumping. "Fine," he muttered, almost reluctantly. "I'll give it back, but don't think this is over." I watched him for a moment, trying to read his expression, trying to gauge whether he truly understood the gravity of what he had done, but I couldn't dwell on that. He had agreed to return the camper van, and that was the victory we needed. As we turned to leave, I could feel the weight lifting from my shoulders, but the fight wasn't over. This was just the beginning. Greg had agreed to give the van back, but I had no intention of stopping there. The money, the betrayal, everything he had taken from us, it was time to make him pay. We walked away from Greg, the weight of the confrontation still heavy in the air between us. I could feel my heart pounding, my legs shaky as I led Ryan back toward the car. We did it. We got him to agree to return the camper van, I thought, but even as relief washed over me, a new layer of anxiety settled in. What about the rest? What about the money? Ryan didn't say much as we walked, but I could sense his unease. I knew he was as exhausted as I was, emotionally drained from the confrontation, but there was also a quiet pride in his steps. He's stronger than I give him credit for, I thought. He had held his ground when it mattered, something I had struggled to do with Greg for so long. As we got into the car, I glanced over at Ryan. His small face was filled with a mixture of emotions. Does he understand what just happened? I wondered. Does he know how much I needed him today? "You were amazing, Ryan," I said, breaking the silence. "I don't know what I would have done without you." He smiled, the corners of his lips turning up slightly. "I just told him the truth, Mom. It wasn't that hard." I chuckled softly, though it didn't quite reach my eyes. The truth. Yes, that was all we really needed in the end. We didn't speak much on the drive home, both of us lost in our thoughts. The drive felt longer than it should have, the road stretching ahead of us like the unknown, full of possibilities, but still clouded with uncertainty. As we pulled into the driveway, I was already bracing myself for what was next. Greg might have agreed to return the camper van, but there was so much more to deal with, so much more I wasn't ready for. The next few days were filled with chaos. Greg's words echoed in my mind, and the anger I had suppressed during our confrontation began to bubble up again. How could he just walk away? How could he think that everything would be so easily erased? I hadn't heard from Greg since our confrontation. I knew he was avoiding me, probably hoping I'd forget about the other things he owed. But I wasn't about to let that happen. The camper van was just the tip of the iceberg. He had taken money from our savings, and he had left me with a substantial debt from the loan. I wasn't going to let him get away with it. I decided it was time to take action. I didn't have the luxury of waiting for Greg to come to his senses. I needed to take control of the situation, and I wasn't going to let him make this any harder than it already was. The first thing I did was call the finance company. I explained the situation, outlining how Greg had abandoned me with the loan and the camper van. They were surprisingly sympathetic, and after some back and forth, they assured me they would work with me to figure out a solution. Next, I took a deep breath and called a lawyer. I had no idea where to start with a legal battle, but I knew I couldn't fight this on my own. The lawyer was kind and understanding, and after explaining the situation, he assured me that I had a strong case. He also advised me to file for divorce, something that, to be honest, I had already been contemplating for some time. The next few days felt like a blur of meetings, phone calls, and paperwork. I spent hours going through old financial records, trying to figure out how Greg had siphoned off money without my knowledge. I was shocked at how much he had taken, how easily he had hidden it from me. It wasn't just the loan. It was the savings we had built together. But through it all, I had Ryan by my side. He kept me grounded, kept me focused on the bigger picture. His quiet support was exactly what I needed to keep moving forward. One afternoon, just as I was starting to lose hope, I got a call from the lawyer. "Hannah," he said, "we've got something. Greg's agreed to pay the debt, but it's going to take some time. We're also adding child support to the mix. You'll get that every month, starting this month." I blinked, not quite processing his words. "What? Greg agreed to this?" "Yes, it seems like he wants to avoid a full legal battle, so he's willing to settle. It's not perfect, but it's a start. You'll be able to move on from this." I felt a rush of emotions at the news. It wasn't the perfect outcome, but it was a step in the right direction. I could finally start to breathe again. Maybe this nightmare is almost over, I thought, a sense of relief washing over me. The following weeks were a blur of paperwork and legal meetings, but each step forward felt like a victory. I sold the camper van, using the money to pay off the remainder of the loan. It was a bittersweet moment, but I knew it was the right thing to do. The van was a symbol of everything that had gone wrong, and I was ready to move on. Ryan and I settled into a new routine, one that was slowly starting to feel normal again. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't perfect, but it was ours. I had learned that no matter what life threw at us, I could handle it. I had survived Greg's betrayal, and I had found the strength to rise above it. As for Greg, he eventually returned the money he owed, though it didn't come without a fight. I kept my resolve firm, knowing that the road ahead wasn't about revenge. It was about ensuring that Ryan and I could move forward with our heads held high. Through it all, Ryan became more than just a son to me. He was my partner, my rock, the one person I knew I could rely on no matter what. And together, we would face whatever came next, stronger than we had ever been before. The days that followed were filled with a quiet determination. As much as I wanted to celebrate the small victories, the repayment of the loan, the return of the camper van, the legal settlement, I knew that it wasn't the end. It wasn't a perfect resolution, but it was progress. Every step I took toward rebuilding my life felt like a small triumph against the overwhelming sense of loss that had once seemed insurmountable. Greg had come through with the money he owed, but only after a lot of pushing and legal pressure. The child support payments began to come in regularly, though I didn't trust him. Not anymore. I had come to terms with the fact that our relationship was forever broken, that the man I once knew had disappeared into someone unrecognizable. But in some strange way, that realization gave me peace. The man I had spent over a decade with wasn't who I thought he was, and that truth was freeing, even though it was painful. Ryan and I settled into a new rhythm. It wasn't easy. We were still adjusting to life without Greg. There were moments when I'd find myself thinking back to the family we used to be, those brief fleeting memories of vacations, birthdays, simple afternoons spent together. But I learned to remind myself that the future was ahead of us, not behind. And with Ryan by my side, I felt a sense of purpose that I hadn't felt in years. One day, I was at the kitchen table, sorting through paperwork. The usual stack of bills had shrunk, and with each envelope I opened, I felt a small bit of the weight lifting off my shoulders. The phone rang, breaking my focus, and I looked at the caller ID. It was the lawyer. My heart skipped a beat as I picked it up, already bracing myself for more bad news. "Hannah," the lawyer's voice was calm but firm. "I have the final details on the settlement. Greg's made the last payment, and it's all in the system now. Everything is official." I sat back in my chair, feeling a wave of relief. It's finally over. The debts were cleared, and the legal battle that had loomed over my head for so long was now behind me. I realized then that I hadn't felt this light in a very long time. The fear, the anxiety, the uncertainty, it was all starting to fade. "Thank you," I said softly, genuinely grateful for all the support. I don't know how to express how much this means." The lawyer's voice softened. "You did the hard part, you fought for what was right, and now you're moving forward. That's all anyone could ask." After the call ended, I looked across the room at Ryan, who was sitting at the kitchen counter reading a book. He looked up, sensing something had changed. His eyes were bright, full of curiosity, always asking questions, always thinking. "We did it, Mom," he said, his voice filled with the quiet pride that always left me amazed. It's over. I smiled and walked over to him, sitting down beside him. Yes, it is. And now we get to build something new. A life that's just ours. Ryan nodded. I'm glad you're happy again, Mom. You seem lighter, like you're not so sad anymore. His words hit me like a wave, and for the first time in a long while, I allowed myself to breathe deeply. He was right, I felt lighter. I wasn't weighed down by the burden of the past anymore. I had no illusions left about Greg or our failed marriage, but now there was a chance to create something real, something lasting with Ryan. I'm happy, Ryan. Really happy, I whispered, my voice full of warmth. We're going to be okay. The days that followed were filled with quiet joy and a sense of stability that I hadn't known in a long time. Ryan and I worked together to make our home a place of peace again. We spent weekends exploring new hobbies, visiting local parks, and making new memories. Just the two of us. It wasn't the life I had once dreamed of, but in many ways, it was better. It was ours. And for the first time I could see a future where I wasn't just surviving, but truly living. I took a hard look at myself, at the woman I had become. I had spent so much time focused on making everything work, trying to hold on to a dream that had already slipped through my fingers. But I realized now that the dream wasn't lost. It had just changed. This is my life now, I thought, and I'm going to make it everything I want it to be. Ryan continued to impress me every day. His intelligence, his maturity, it was a constant reminder of how strong he was, even at such a young age. He was more than just my son, he was my partner, my reason for moving forward. Together we had faced the worst, and together we would keep moving towards something better. Every evening as we sat down to dinner, I couldn't help but feel grateful. Grateful for the strength I didn't know I had, grateful for the lessons I had learned, and above all, grateful for Ryan, who had been my anchor throughout this storm. We had both been through a lot, but we had come out on the other side, stronger, wiser, and ready to embrace whatever the future held for us. I didn't need Greg to validate my worth anymore. I didn't need his approval to be happy. What mattered was that Ryan and I were moving forward, together. And for the first time in a long time, I knew that everything would be okay. As the weeks turned into months, I began to see our lives shift in ways I hadn't expected. The dust of everything that had happened still lingered, but it no longer felt as heavy. I had come to realize that the hardest part wasn't just facing the betrayal or the debt. It was learning how to let go of the life I had envisioned with Greg, and starting to build a new vision, one that didn't include him. Ryan had become my greatest source of strength, his resilience a constant reminder of why I had to keep moving forward. There were moments when I would look at him, his bright eyes full of dreams and his thoughtful questions about the world, and I would feel a swell of pride and hope. He was such a smart, kind-hearted boy, and in many ways he was showing me the way. He had been the one to take charge when everything seemed to be falling apart. And now, he was teaching me that there was always a way forward, even when it felt impossible. I decided to go back to the things that brought me joy, the things that made me feel alive before everything had crumbled. It had been so long since I had allowed myself to do anything just for me. I started painting again, something I hadn't touched in years. I would take the time to sit at my easel, paintbrush in hand, and let the world slip away. There was something so freeing about expressing myself through color and shape, a way to release all the emotions I had been holding in for so long. Ryan was incredibly supportive of this newfound passion. He would sit beside me while I painted, chatting about school, about his day, or just asking me questions about the things he was learning. It wasn't always easy, balancing work, life, and parenting, but I realized that every moment spent with him was a gift. He made me see that the most important thing in life wasn't perfection. It was connection, love, and finding joy in the little things. One weekend, we decided to take a trip to a nearby hiking trail. It had been months since we had done anything like this, and I realized how much I missed the simple pleasure of being outdoors, away from the pressures of everyday life. The sun was shining, and the air was crisp with the scent of pine. We walked for hours, laughing, talking, and simply enjoying each other's company. During the hike, I couldn't help but reflect on how far we had come. It had been a long road, one filled with pain and uncertainty, but I was beginning to see the light at the end of the tunnel. It wasn't just about getting back to where we were before, it was about creating something new, something stronger. As we sat down by a stream to rest, Ryan looked up at me and asked, "Mom, do you think we'll ever be a family again?" His question took me by surprise. He wasn't asking about Greg, but about the idea of family as a whole. He was already understanding what I had struggled to accept, the fact that family wasn't just about one person or a shared name, it was about the bond we created between each other. And in that moment, I realized something important. "We already are a family," I said, my voice filled with emotion. "You and me. That's all we need." Ryan smiled, his face lighting up as if he understood exactly what I meant. We were a family. We didn't need anyone else to define that. As the sun began to set, casting a golden hue over the mountains, I realized how much I had grown through all of this. I had been forced to confront my worst fears, the betrayal, the financial strain, the uncertainty, and I had survived it. More than that, I had thrived. I had learned to trust myself again, to find my voice, and to move forward with hope. When we returned home that evening, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't experienced in a long time. The house, once filled with tension and sadness, now felt like a place of warmth. It was our home, a place where Ryan and I could build new memories, and where we could begin to dream again. I started looking into opportunities for growth, both professionally and personally. I had been hesitant at first, unsure of where to start, but the confidence I had found in myself gave me the courage to pursue new goals. I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was living, and that was a feeling I hadn't experienced in years. One evening, as we sat down for dinner, Ryan looked across the table at me and said, "Mom, I think we should start planning another trip, this time just the two of us." I smiled, knowing that this was the beginning of a new chapter for us, one full of adventures, new experiences, and a fresh start. "I think that sounds like a great idea, Ryan. Where should we go?" "I don't know yet," he said, his eyes twinkling, "but we can decide together." As we finished our meal, I felt a sense of gratitude wash over me. This was the life I was meant to have, one that was mine, one that was full of love, strength, and possibilities. I had no idea what the future would hold, but I knew that as long as Ryan and I were together, I could handle anything. And for the first time in a long time, I truly believed that everything was going to be okay,